You're watching Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, president of Parker University, and this is Clinical Rounds. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Kimberly Noble. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you just gave a great speech at NeuroCon, and it was fascinating. And we'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been researching. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm a neuroscientist and a board-certified pediatrician, and I study how growing up in poverty shapes child development.
So I was very impressed with this. The data you shared was fascinating, and can you tell us a little bit about your study?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a number of studies. One of our more prominent ones is known as Baby's First Years, which is the first clinical trial of poverty reduction in early childhood in the U.S. And so I'm one of several principal investigators on that study. It's led by a team of economists, developmental psychologists, neuroscientists, social policy experts. And we're really setting out to try to understand the extent to which income in and of itself helps to shape child development. So, it's been very clear for decades that growing up in poverty puts kids at risk for a host of detrimental outcomes, everything from lower school achievement to poor health to lower likelihood of employment and time in the labor force as adults. But we can't say for sure whether income is causing those differences or is just associated with those differences, right? It's the old adage.
Yes, yeah.
Correlation is not causation. Exactly.
So, but it was fascinating. But the thing is, the crossover was interesting too, though. So
right.
That was fascinating as you were sharing your information. So basically, at birth, the EEG studies were equal.
We don't see differences, that's right, but we see differences in children's brain development as they get older associated with family resources. And so we set out to ask the question, if we actually give families resources, does it change children's trajectories? There are plenty of people out there who would say, well, it's not poverty, it's all the things associated with poverty, or even whether you're willing to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. But, babies don't have bootstraps. And so if we can see what is the impact on children, if we give families resources, it has the potential to have important ramifications.
Before hearing your talk, and I hadn't read your studies, I was thinking those things too. All the other things of, two parents in the home,
yeah.
People who basically, are you poor because you have lower cognitive function, or all these other things? But you pretty much took that away, and then by providing additional money to the two groups, you showed actually for somebody who's not making very much money, giving them a little bit more actually helps quite a bit.
So that's what we're seeing preliminarily, right? So the study is still ongoing. We're going to be measuring children's cognition and behavior at age 4, so we don't have that information yet. But our first glimpse seems to be in that direction. So after just the first year of monthly unconditional cash support, we already saw evidence suggesting that the infants of the moms receiving more money were changing in ways that support the subsequent development of thinking and learning.
So I'm kind of conservative, but I'm looking at this like, I get this. And I've worked in Congress. I took care of Congress for 18 years. So I can see that providing this to decision makers, good hard data, like this does make a difference. So when you're making decisions to for welfare and social programs, this could really make a difference.
Yeah, so we're scientists, we're not advocates, but our job is to present the data in an unbiased way. And so certainly it's the case that lots of policymakers have their eyes on this study, which is why we're so, careful to make sure that the data are, rigorously checked, and that we provide the clearest evidence possible that the data can provide.
Unfortunately, there's not too many scientists in Congress. So although I knew a couple of them when I was up there, Roscoe Bartlett was a PhD. So can we talk about the changes you put in here as you did this longitudinal study? You gave some moms little bit of money, some more
That's
money,
right.
and you followed that longitudinally.
That's
And
right.
you still are following
We
that.
still are, that's right. Yeah, so that's the beauty of a randomized controlled trial, right? You try to treat everybody exactly the same except for the one small difference. In this case, everyone's getting money on a debit card. Everyone can spend it however they like. It's just the differences in the amounts of money that that is the difference between the two groups.
When I saw the name on the debit card, I thought, well, maybe that might even interfere with.
Absolutely. You know, you're right. So it's branded the For My Baby card. And so while moms are not told they have to spend it in any particular way, they're not prohibited from spending it on some items versus others, there is that behavioral nudge. And so to the extent that they associate it with their children, they may decide to spend it more for their children. We do have a sub-study, a qualitative sub-study. So a subsample of the moms are participating in in-depth interviews so that we can get a better sense of how the money changes their day-to-day lives. And the definition that moms seem to consider as being For My Baby is broad, right? So some are like, okay, I'm going to use it for baby clothes. Fine. But others say, well, I'm going to use it to pay my bills or to pay my rent, right? Because it's For My Baby is for my whole family. So I point taken that we do have that behavioral nudge on there, but we are also asking them, to what extent does that matter?
Well, I think it negated it by having, you're giving, can I say the amounts?
Yeah, of
the
course.
$333 to the one group and $22 to the other group. So it kind of takes that off. There's a change to 22. It doesn't matter about, how I'm, what I'm doing with, so that I'm going to be more conscious of taking care of my baby.
And we are carefully measuring expenditures. So this is work that's led in part by one of the economists on the team, Lisa Janetian, who is studying and working on publishing work, looking at differences in purchases, child-focused expenditures like books and toys, for example. So that work should be coming out soon. We also have a study that was recently published. The lead author was Paul Yu, that suggested no differences in parents' expenditures on alcohol or substances, right? So we're really not seeing any evidence that the cash gift spurs spending on substances.
That would be something that decision makers would definitely question. So it's good that you anticipated that and look through it out there. But you also had other things that you showed that in some of the devices you put on the children, that they're interactive conversations.
That's right. So that's some different work. So not babies' first years. We've looked at otherwise what other kinds of experiences vary along socioeconomic lines. And so a number of research laboratories have shown that socioeconomic differences often exist in the number of conversations children engage in. We had work suggesting that that number of conversations itself was associated with brain development in regions that support language. And so you can kind of see this mechanistic pathway emerging whereby differences in exposure to conversation seems to shape brain development in a way that supports ultimate language development.
Years ago, actually probably 35, 40 years ago, I practiced in sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow.
And so the father would come in at the end of the day and eat first, and then the children and the wife would get, in this culture, what after he was done, they could eat. And he would come and eat the meat, and there'd be palm butter and rice left for everybody else. So we're seeing that with the low protein diet in Africa was also affecting mentation. So it became generational, so that when the children grew up and they were the fathers, they're getting the protein when it's actually too late for their own brain development.
And we're looking at nutrition as well, both maternal report of the kinds of healthy and unhealthy foods that she's buying for her children, and as the children begin to turn 4, we're going to be measuring body mass index, because we know we have an obesity epidemic, particularly among disadvantaged children in our society. And so, to what extent do these economic resources
So you
change
also
that?
talk about cortisol, but with obesity, you also get pro-inflammatory cytokines.
That's right.
So now you have this inflammation of the brain at a very significant developmental time of their lives. So that could also impair.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we're able to ultimately follow these kids on up through high school and even adulthood, right? Because while thankfully, most children early in their lives are healthy, we know that poverty puts individuals at risk for physical health problems down the road, things on the inflammatory cascade.
Greater obesity,
diabetes, heart
all these other
disease.
things, and also the stress component to it.
Absolutely.
Too. As we were taking hair samples and finding elevated cortisol levels in children. So the stress of life is really affecting them. So
For sure.
what kind of things would you recommend? What kind of takeaways would you give to our audience, who are mainly clinicians, that as they can impact children's lives?
Yeah, well, I think recognizing that children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds are at risk for a host of experiences that can have real health and achievement outcomes. And so, to the extent that families are able to be plugged into the social services and benefits that they qualify for through social work or through other pathways, can be really helpful and make a meaningful difference in their lives.
So also, breastfeeding would be a good thing. You encourage breastfeeding, I know.
Of course, yeah.
So have you looked into that in your studies?
We are measuring the extent to which we may or may not see differences in breastfeeding following implementation of the cash gift. We haven't looked at it personally in other studies in my lab.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us here,
Thank
Parker.
you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
It was a great speech, great interview, and we just appreciate you. You've been listening to Dr. Kimberly Noble, and this is Clinical Rounds.
Thanks for watching another episode of Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.